Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us this evening. We've got an extraordinarily exciting event, and it's my absolute privilege to welcome renowned civil rights leader, campaigner for social justice, and Baptist minister, the Reverend Al Sharpton.
Well, thank you very much. Let me say that as we are in the middle of the campaigns in the United States over the Republican primaries, and you're approaching elections in England, as we're seeing what is going on in various places around the world, from Ukraine to the Middle East, to what is not, in my judgment, talked enough about, Sudan and Niger. I think that we're at a critical place in history on how we are going to be governed and how we are going to proceed. I think that if the elections in the United States is any indication, and the leadership in Israel is any indication, is there is a real battle for whether this country is going to, whether this country and the Western world, as well as the Middle East, is going to have democratic principles or go back toward an autocracy. When you look at what Donald Trump's presidency and the following he's got has come to, when you look at what Netanyahu has come to, when you look at the ethnic wars in Sudan, it is almost like all of the progressive movements that have gone down in the last 50 to 100 years did not happen. And I think that it is imperative that people that believe in democracy and believe in human rights take a firm last stand now, because if it goes the other way, I do not know if it will be easily turned back. Donald Trump is blatantly using racism and homophobia and xenophobia. Netanyahu is blatantly saying that even though his country was, in my judgment, blatantly attacked and with a disregard for human life, that he's going to overdo it the other way. And I think both of them are running from their own legal troubles, but the fact that they have support is what is troubling. So I think that we're at a very precarious time, and a time that we're at the crossroads of where we as a human governing principle will be. So that is my opening comments. We can then talk.
Thank you so much for that really insightful address and for taking the time to join us this evening. It's a privilege to host you. I wanted to start by talking about the church in relation to civil rights and activism. And the church has been such a crucible for civil rights activism in the United States. You know, yourself, the chairman of the National Action Network as well, based in the church, and many of the most well-known figures in the civil rights movement have found the church a place to articulate their struggle for social justice. What do you think about the church has made it such a distinguished platform for advocating for social justice when, in some other respects, the church is considered a bastion for social conservatism?
I think that the reason the church became such a bastion for activism in Black America is that the church was the first institution that Black folks owned. when we were freed from slavery in 1863, you had to remember Emancipation Proclamation signed January 1st, 1863, we could be free in slave states. Lincoln didn't free in the free states, so-called, but slave states. We then walked off plantations owning nothing, having nothing, not even income. Only thing we had was the ability to gather, which was our churches. And it became that institution that we pooled, gathered, and out of it, black businesses, black colleges, black politics started. So it was our familiar gathering ground. And I think that went on for the next set of many generations, since everything generated in terms of our being free from the church, it remained that way. So that's why it became the vehicle. It also became the vehicle that we owned. So if you were in another institution that others were in charge, you could not express yourself. The black church was governed by black folks. So we could decide what we wanted to say. We paid our bills. We paid the salaries of our preachers. So it gave us a certain freedom of expression and movement. Lastly, it was where we gathered. It was mobilization. So if you were going to have mass movements, mass protests, political empowerment, people voting, you would go to where the people gathered. And that was our gathering place, and still is. Even with the decline of churches, it is still the largest gathering place of black people on a weekly basis. So we may say that the black church may be 70% of what it was, but you don't have any other place that gathers as many blacks on a weekly basis as the black church does.
No, it's remarkable. It's my understanding that you're attending an event with this church in Westminster tomorrow, which sounds fascinating.
Right. And we're meeting with some of the church ministers, pastors tomorrow with Sir Simon Woolley to talk about voting. And again, if we have 100 clergymen there and they talk to their congregations, what institutions in England will talk to that many people? Now, you could have more people at a concert, but that's a one-time event. That's not a weekly event. And most people that go to church are people that are solid citizens that will vote. Most people that go to a concert may not vote. So you can have 3,000 people at a concert and 50 voters. You can have 200 people in a church and 190 voters. So that's where your political power is.
No, it's fascinating. And just to kind of take a step back and look at your, extraordinary career in civil rights activism.
Underline extraordinary.
And it's with a couple of episodes that stand out, sort of your response to the attacks in Howard Beach, your campaign against stop and frisk in New York. What would you say, is there a common thread throughout your activism, though, in the decades, which you think has contributed towards its effectiveness? Like, what would you say is the common thread that underlines your philosophy towards activism that makes it effective, or you think has made it more effective?
Well, I think, let me unpack that several ways. I think that one of the threads that goes all the way through my activism has been to deal with the unfairness in the criminal justice system that had not been dramatized and dealt with. And I think the preserving of the voting rights and the preserving of dealing with economic empowerment. Now, I put criminal justice first because I think that our dramatizing it and bringing it to a front issue is what led to stop and frisk laws changing, and what led to having police having to wear cameras. All that came out of a movement. So just like if you deal with a couple of generations ago, Martin Luther King was not a member of Congress. He didn't write the Civil Rights Act. He didn't write the Voting Rights Act. But he started a movement that made those acts become written and passed by the legislators. Same thing happened with us. We were the ones that, they were stopping and frisking people for years. Police were getting away with police killings for years. It wasn't until we made it an issue that it forced them to start talking about police reforms. We need to stop stopping frisking. Because there's a difference in having policy discussions and theoretical discussions and in putting bodies in the street and dramatize that this is a major concern, because then politicians have to react, and when politicians have to react, you can get things done. So I think that criminal justice, preserving economic rights and voting has been the threads, but my method has been to dramatize the need for these things. Give you an example, Trayvon Martin, killed in Sanford, Florida. Man said he thought he was robbing something, kills him. If we had put out a press release, it'd have been a one-day story. By going to Florida and having rallies with thousands of people, it forced them to indict him. When I first went to Florida, they wouldn't even arrest Zimmerman. But by the time we finished, he was indicted. Now, he was acquitted, but he was indicted, and stopping frisk laws came under question. Fast forward a few years later, Eric Garner gets choked to death in New York. Well, we dramatized that. And then Michael Brown, all the way to George Floyd, that we finally not only dramatize, we get indictments and convictions. Movements are process. It took Martin Luther King and that movement from 55, the Montgomery boycott, to 64 before it took them from 55 to 64 to get the Civil Rights Act. So a lot of people are tricked into, why hasn't anything changed? It took them almost a decade to get the Civil Rights Act. But in retrospect, people look at it like Dr. King had a boycott, Rosa Parks sat in front of us, Civil Rights Act. No, that took almost 10 years. And it took Emancipation Proclamation 1863, 12 years of Reconstruction. Reconstruction ended because Lincoln's killed Andrew Johnson, was a Southern Democrat that really wasn't with it. The Ku Klux Klan emerged. Supreme Court gives Plessy versus Ferguson, which robbed blacks of their rights. It took 60 years to go from that to 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education. So movements are processes. Nelson Mandela stayed in jail 27 years. So the one thing young people need to learn is there is no microwave movements. You can't just put it in and pull it out and it's done. You're going to have to be committed to the long haul. And if you are really committed, you will be there for the long haul. If you're not, then you don't deserve the freedoms that you expect to get.
And I just had a couple more questions before I'll open it up to the floor. But you spoke in your speech about, kind of areas like Sudan, which weren't being focused on enough as kind of conflict zones around the world. And looking at some of your perhaps lesser-known activism surrounding kind of Puerto Rico, and I read that you spent 90 days in detention in Puerto Rico campaigning against, I believe it was US testing of chemicals and artillery in Puerto Rico. Can you walk us through kind of that lesser-known sort of chapter of activism and how that links more broadly to kind of how that links more broadly to your broader philosophy and activism?
I think that's a great example. 2001, there was an island off of San Juan, Puerto Rico called Vieques that the United States Navy was doing bombing exercises. the bombing exercises proved to be causing asthma and other respiratory diseases toward the children on that island. So people started protesting the Navy bombing exercises. They would go to jail by laying down in front of the Navy units there. I had, the year before, led a protest against the police killing in New York of a young man from Guinea, Africa, called Amadou Diallo. Amadou Diallo was staying in the Bronx, stuck his key in his door to go upstairs. Police said they thought he had a gun because they were surveilling the place, shot at him 41 times, hit him 19 and killed him. We led protests. I started leading sit-ins to go to jail. Many of the Latino officials went to jail with me in '99 protesting what happened to Amadou Diallo. So when I heard about what was going on in Puerto Rico, to keep a coalition together, I called some of the Puerto Rican officials and said, y'all went to jail with me. I'm willing to go to Puerto Rico and go to jail with y'all because you must have a coalition where you work together. And they said, you'd really do that? I said, yeah. And we went down. And as I said, they would go through the gates of the Navy base and lay down and be arrested. I went down, went through the gates of the Navy base and was arrested. They decided to make examples out of us. And rather than let us go, they gave us a court date. We came back in 3 weeks. They gave me 3 months in jail. And I did federal time, 3 months in jail. Now, Hillary Clinton was the senator in New York then. Chuck Schumer was the senator then, as he still is. They had me transferred to federal jail in New York. So I stayed about 2 weeks in Puerto Rico, then did the rest of the time in New York. But jail is jail. I mean, people talk about you feel better in New York. No, I feel better home. But you know, if you're in jail, the outside doesn't matter. You're still inside behind bars. The drama of that, though, what I decided to do as one who studied the generations before me, I couldn't do anything about the 90 days, but I could use that as a platform. So I did every interview, everything I could to heighten what was going on. By the time I got out of jail, they had to close that Navy base. So even though we did not win the right of protest not being penalized, we were able to get the objective. If you went to Vieques Island now, they have a plaque for what they call the Vieques for me and the 3 others that did the time in jail. So the King movement taught that you must dramatize things in order to get people's attention, but then you must have substance when you get that attention to turn that into real policy change or legislation. The trick is don't get so caught up in the drama that you're just a dramatist, or don't be so academic that you're just one that has the content. You need both. If you just have content without the drama, nobody's gonna pay you any attention. And if you only have the theatrics, then no one's gonna take you seriously.
And the last kind of question I wanted to ask concerned, again, the international and the civil rights movement that you kind of you grew up in sort of the crucible of the 60s. You know, I believe you're only 13 when Martin Luther King died. And you kind of spoke about, I believe in your interview with the New York Times, how you went from a situation where you had all these different activist organizations, and what came at the end of the 60s was the election of Richard Nixon. Do you think that the 60s was a great time of international activism? Do you think that something's been lost in terms of the internationalization of activism, particularly in relation to issues you mentioned around Sudan and Palestine?
You mentioned Vieques, you mentioned Sudan, mentioned my internationalism. You did good research. They weren't as good at Oxford, I have to say that. Now that's really patronizing for me to do that, right? I'm playing to the crowd. Anyway, but no, I think that the globalizing of the movement that the 60s into the 70s did has been, in many ways, I won't say lost, but taken back, which is why I work closely with Simon here and others, because this is a global movement. The same forces that are behind playing the ethnic battles and arming both sides in Sudan are the same people that are taking an interest in the Middle East on both sides. Don't forget the Saudis are clearly involved in Sudan. Nobody wants to talk about that. And the same elements that you're fighting and same politics you're fighting in England is the same politics we're fighting in America. The players are different, but the players the same. And I think that if we all were more connected, that we could put pressure on people. I'll give you an example. When they put the pressure on Harvard University to fire Dr. Claudine Gay as the president, saying that she was a DEI hire, diversity, equity, and inclusion hire, and she didn't know how to handle the student protests on campus. One of the guys that led that fight was a guy named Bill Ackman, who was a billionaire investor. Well, he has headquarters here in London and in New York. So if we all were together, we're picketing him in New York, we'd be picketing in both places. That's what they were able to do in the 60s and 70s, all the way up to the 80s. The Free Mandela movement was a global movement. People one of the biggest Free Mandela demonstrations was in London. It wasn't just in South Africa. People going to jail into America. I think once you globalize it, they have globalized the business community, but we've not globalized those that would hold them accountable.
But something's been lost in terms of that internationalization.
Right.
No. Well, I have plenty more questions, but I'd like to open it up to the floor. So, just right at the back. Oh, we've just got a mic.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. One of my earliest childhood memories is watching you with my grandpa on MSNBC. But I wanted to ask, when you're talking about globalization, and then also after working for Jesse Jackson and mentioning the importance of coalition building, what do you think is what has been lost as we've become more international, and how do you think we can get back into building coalitions to further the movements instead of focusing on identity politics?
I think that what has been lost is that we've allowed those that control media and public thought to play us against each other. So I think that we've said, well, I'm not with the women's movement, I'm not with the LGBTQ movement, I'm not with the black movement, because I'm not one of them. And I think that the fact is that none of us are going to be in the situations of complete freedom and liberty if all of us are not. So you may have to fight for people that you are not in their tribe, but in order for all of us to be free, we've got to stand up and fight for that. So when I started standing up for LGBTQ rights, a lot of people in the black church were very critical of that. And I said, I'm not asking you to agree with them. I'm saying they have the right to be whatever they want to be, just like you have the right to practice whatever religion you preach. I think that we've got to get back to making people understand that freedom cannot be decentralized. Freedom either has to be the rule of where we are on this planet or it's not. And it can't be compartmentalized. I'm going to do gay freedom here, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to do blacks better here. No, it's got to be freedom, and we've got to all reinforce it together.
Just at the front there.
Hi, I'm asking this question both in light of what you said about the importance of extending anti-discrimination beliefs and in light of the horrific rise in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in October the 7th. Many people have criticised your record on anti-Semitism. After the Crown Heights riots, you appeared to link, when there was a pogrom breaking out against Jewish people in New York, you appeared to link the murder to jewelers in Crown Heights, which was interpreted by many as an anti-Semitic remark. It was also said, diamond merchants. It was also referred to, you also once said, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house. That seems very reminiscent of anti-Semitic things that have been hurled at my friends. And in light of rising anti-Semitism and the need for solidarity between movements at risk of the far right, would you be willing to apologize for and condemn your actions during this period?
I would if I did it. I've never said that if Jews would pin their yarmulkes down, come to my house. I said that a man named Mordecai Levy, who had been indicted and prosecuted for terrorism, said he was coming to my house to give me a haircut. I said to pin his yarmulke down, tell him, come on. That's not attacking all Jews. If I attack him, I'm not attacking all his religion. I don't even know what his religion is. So I think that if you deal with a distorted social media reenactment of events, you will then be looking for apologies that didn't happen. That never was said, one. Second, in Crown Heights, I got to Crown Heights after Yankee Rosenbaum was killed, the day after. I wasn't even called. So I can't apologize for something that I wasn't involved in. If I did something, I'm the first one to apologize. But I'm not going to apologize for somebody's miscasting of history. I'll put it to you this way. If I had did what you said, I don't think that in the coalitions that we've built, including the last march we had in Washington last August and the ones before that, where major Jewish organizations worked with me, I don't think they would be doing that if there was any truth to that. But again, like I said to her, they play us against each other. And as long as they can say, oh, Sharpton said so-and-so. When? 30 years ago. Who said it? Somebody on social media that we don't even know who that is. You shaking your head, who said it then? Oh, okay.
Your comments are on public record.
What record? Name the record.
You said those comments back in 1995.
But I'm telling you, I didn't say them. So name me the record that...
We have enough, we have...
No. Because I think he needs to get abused of this. I'm telling you that I did not say that. So tell me the record you're saying that proves I did.
I mean, it's on your Wikipedia page.
It's not on my Wikipedia page. I mean, you know you just conceded defeat, but it is not on my Wikipedia page.
I think that's an interesting point. I also think it's interesting that you didn't refute what I said about what you said about the sermon of that boy.
About the what?
Merchants, which was a direct quote from your eulogy of that boy.
No, get my eulogy. My eulogy said that I want to see blacks to stop snatching pocketbooks on Eastern Parkway, and Oppenheimer and those that are selling diamond jewels from South Africa to diamond merchants here in Crown Heights. I was talking about apartheid diamonds that was being sold. That's what the eulogy said. All right? I know the eulogy because I gave it. Now, you could chop up the sentence and say he said diamond merchants. Or you could chop it up and say he called blacks pocketbook snatchers. I talked about what was going on wrong at the same time. And I'm glad you raised it so we can clear this up. A guy 2 years ago did a documentary on me called Loudmouth, Josh Alexander. He happened to be in England and he's here today. He could tell you he thought some of the same things and did the research. Am I right? Am I saying exactly what happened? And as you can see, Josh is, I don't know if he's Jewish, but he certainly ain't black. But that's the distortion. Jesse Jackson said Hymietown. Therefore, everything else he did, he's an anti-Semite. Dr. King says some of our sick white brothers. For people to try and democratize a country going the other way, to have to chase behind things that they were falsely accused of saying. And then, at the same time, now, here's the rub. I preached that eulogy, 33 years ago, and you got a distorted line. The other thing you said, I never said, right? But that's always go back 30 years ago. Today, not 33 years ago, you got a guy that says, blacks like me because I got a mugshot and that I got 4 indictments, which is act like blacks are naturally criminals. That's today. And he's tied to be president of the United States. Talk about it. So what are we gauging by here? And believe me, if they got to go, I don't know how old you are, you don't even look 30. If they got to go back 33 years to destroy what you said, it must mean you didn't give them nothing in the last 33 years.
Just there.
Thank you. I just getting a grasp on who you are, both as a thought leader and as a source of, I think, moral consistency, particularly in the United States and across these civil rights movements. How does your faith inform your politics and your leadership?
My faith is the basis of my activism and leadership. I started in civil rights as a boy preacher in the church, and I saw civil rights as my moral obligation. My interpretation of the Bible was that it was about right fighting wrong. Second book in the Bible is Exodus, the freedom of slaves in Egypt. So I did not see how the church became this place where you just have rituals and don't go out and do the work. Moses didn't make the Bible because he had great services. He led a liberation struggle against Pharaoh. So that was the basis of my activism.
Just at the front there.
Hi, Reverend. Thank you for being here today. You mentioned in your starting statement that the world is at a turning point in the direction that it should go in. I think everyone here probably agrees with that. I definitely do. I'm aware of the long-standing conversation and controversy between you and Dr. Cornel West, and I was wondering if you could discuss or give your thoughts or views on his presidential run and campaign. Thank you.
Well, Cornel West and I had a disagreement on, he felt I should not be relating to President Obama. We didn't have a long-standing disagreement. When I led a delegation to Africa, when I ran for president, he went with me. We were friends. He felt that I should not be close to Obama. I felt that because he had differences with Obama, that should not govern me. And now he's running for president himself. I don't know, I've not talked to him other than hello, goodbye, about the campaign. I don't know the strategy of the campaign. When I ran, I wanted to put pressure on the Democratic Party to change its platform and become more aggressive on criminal justice and other issues, and to oppose the war in Iraq. When I entered the race, nobody in the race was against the war in Iraq. The only way I could influence that is to be in the Democratic debates and the Democratic primaries. Cornel is running as an independent. He won't be in those debates. He will not affect the party. So I don't know the strategy of running as a third party. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I don't understand the strategy. Or Robert Kennedy, for that matter. Or Jill Stein. I don't understand the risk of taking votes that could help elect Trump should be considered, unless they have a strategy that I'm not aware of.
Do you have any thoughts on its policies?
I don't hear you.
Any thoughts on
Policies.
Whose policies? I don't know what they are. I tell you, we've only had some hello, goodbye. I don't know what they are.
Yes, just there. Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for your talk. It's very riveting. I wanted to ask just what do you think, as for us, especially a lot of us from the African Society of the Cambridge University and the African Caribbean societies, and those of us who are of that heritage in the diaspora in the UK, how do you think that intersectionality between UK race struggles and African American race struggles intersect, and how do you think that in this kind of modern age, with a lot of the politics of the day, can we actually make a difference now without, I guess, having issues like this where we're getting misquoted 30 years on, and actually stay true to our values and integrity? I guess for me as a Christian as well, and you starting off from the church, do you think that you have had to compromise your faith and what you believe to be relevant in terms of the civil rights movement as well?
Okay, I think that the way you must do that is you must be committed to the end goal of making sure that you're fighting for equal fairness for everyone, equal protection under the law, and equal opportunity, and hold that standard. And the way to do that globally, as you ask, around the diaspora, is that should be the standard in the US, the UK, African nations, and you jointly do that together. Since you have multinational corporations, if we have multinational movements, we can put pressure on those multinational corporations so that they would be challenged globally. And I think that is the self-interest is the key of organizing. In terms of then you won't be misquoted 33 years, you're going to be misquoted. I don't care how you conduct yourself. They are going to always distort it because that is in the interest of what they do. So it's like if you're an athlete, if you're a boxer, you're going to have to take a punch to get a punch. And I think that if you're not prepared to get punched, don't get in the ring. Be prepared to win, though. And I think that is what you've got to be determined to do. But if you're looking to not be distorted, don't get in movements, because they're going to distort you.
Just there, please. Yeah. Oh, could you just speak up slightly? Sorry.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, it is. Hi. So my name is Zishan. I work in the anti-racism space. And one thing that I'm really wrestling with is how we think about day-to-day interactions between people of different racial groups. And namely, if you have a ethnic minority patient in the medical space, can they trust a white doctor to the same extent they can trust a doctor from the same ethnic background? Now, do you think that fundamentally that racial groups are segmented so much that actually you should feel more comfortable with people from the same background as you? Or do you think actually we should move to a world whereby everybody ought to trust everybody regardless of their ethnic background and judge them on individual characters?
I mean, I think that those that have been excluded will sometime try and support those that are similar to them because they don't want to reinforce the exclusion. But I think in a in a dream world, we try to make everything equal, but we don't come from equal circumstances and equal situations. So, for example, you have some in the black community in the States that'll say, I want to support black-owned businesses, not because they want to punish whites, but because blacks did not have businesses for a long time. So I think that having the mindset that one is better than the other is wrong, as you use that, and that we need to be able to be supportive of each other. But being supportive of each other also, we should understand that we don't come to the table with the same backgrounds and pains and neglect. And if you really want to act in harmony with me, you understand the scars that I bear that I didn't inflict on myself. So that comes along with that discussion. So as we deal with, someone mentioned the anti-Semitism, and I think it was my Wikipedia brother there that mentioned anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Well, we've got to understand the pain of both of them that have been hurt, that have been profiled, that have been denied. And understanding that means that we're trying to come together. But to try to erase that, I think, is something that only reinforces it.
Just the front there.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you for coming. Obviously, it goes without saying that black voters in the United States overwhelmingly vote for Democrats, and without those voters, Joe Biden wouldn't be president. But at the same time, we saw, and it's small enough to maybe be a rounding error, and I'm interested to hear your view. In 2020, even in the shadow of the George Floyd killing, there was a small, very small, but 3-point swing or so to Donald Trump. And I was wondering, do you think that's a blip, or is there something to be concerned about fissures opening up in the community?
Part of it was distorted. You said that what happened in 2020?
There was a small swing among black voters to Donald Trump.
In 2016, Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote. In 2020, he got 6%. If it swung the other way.
I've seen different evidence, but maybe that's, I guess, that will go to the point of it's so small.
That's the evidence is the numbers. John McCain got 12% of the black vote. So why didn't Donald Trump get at least as many as John McCain did? I think it is fantasy that the Republicans are trying to put out that there's some swing. McCain got more black votes than Donald Trump.
It was, according to NBC's exit report, I think it was a small swing, but as I say, maybe it was small enough and artificially higher, 2016 compared to 2016.
But again, the numbers, I do a show on NBC, and I'm telling you the numbers. John McCain got more votes than Donald Trump black. So I think, Donald Trump lies and say he got 20% of the black vote. He got 20% of the black vote, he'd have won the election. But again, just like right now, it's according to who promotes what. I did Morning Joe from London this morning. And the thing that I said everybody's missing, when Donald Trump said over the weekend that blacks like me because of a mugshot, and that they can identify me because I'm going under indictment, and they've been under indictment. First of all, we were not indicted for trying to rob an election. We was trying to get to vote in elections. But let me tell you where the irony is, where I was saying to him about you got to look at the facts yourself. Why would blacks be rallying around Trump with a mugshot when it was a black woman that arrested him and had the mugshot? He's being indicted by a black woman in Georgia. He was sued successfully by a black woman prosecutor in New York. It's a black woman judge in Washington. So why would we be looking at him and not them that are the ones that are accusing him? There's no white conspiracy against Donald Trump. And I understand Tim Scott loves him, but I don't know many blacks that are gonna love Donald Trump.
Yes, just there. You had your hand up a while.
Thank you so much, Reverend. That was a very inspiring talk. My question to you is, you said that there is no such thing as microwave movements. I entirely agree with you. But one thing that has changed, especially in the last 15 years, is obviously social media and just media overall access around the globe. Do you think that that is a good thing when it comes to accelerating the pace of movements? Or do you think that the spread of false information can actually deter that from happening?
I think that social media can be good or bad. It's like electricity. It could light up a room or it can burn it down if you have it wired wrong. And I think that it has, just like mass media could be good, it could be bad. I think that people have got to be determined if they're going to be in movement, that they're going to move beyond whatever the social media or mass media does and assume some of it's going to be distorted. A lot of people don't understand when you talk about polling, 55% of blacks had an unfavorable view in a poll done 3 days before Martin Luther King got killed. Unfavorable. He was in the negative 55% among blacks. Day after he was killed, he was everybody's hero. So media has been pro and con everybody. And I think that's why I always say, particularly these students, you've got to be firm on your conviction of what you are about. And you can't go by, Martin Luther King used to say, there are two types of leaders. There are thermostats and thermometers. Thermometers judge the temperature in the room. Thermostats change the temperature in the room. If you're a thermometer person, you go whatever the temperature is, whatever's hot, then that's who you are. Thermostats change it, turn the heat up. And you're gonna be unpopular in some circles. You're gonna be controversial, but you're gonna get change.
Now, I think we have time for one more question from the floor. Could we just have it just here?
Give a live example of a thermometer. Just Stop Oil is an activist environmental group in Britain which blocks roads to stop development of a new carbon infrastructure. They get called that they're bringing darkness and a bad name onto the environmentalist movement. And I just wondered if you really feel the urgency of the moment, particularly with Trump and Netanyahu, if you had any comments on disruptive protests, non-violent disruptive protests at this time in the climate emergency.
I support nonviolent protests. And some, I mean...
He's anti-just Paul, I was saying disruptive protests.
Yeah. Sorry. No.
That's all right. 30 years, Wikipedia said I came here and knocked a white guy off the stage. but I think that it's how you define disruption. Because when we sat in on VA...
Blocking the road.
I'm going there. When we sat in on in Vieques, you could say that was disruptive. We had, in his documentary on me, we literally one day stopped New York. I jumped down on the subway tracks and got hundreds to drop down and stopped rush hour, blocked the bridges. So I think that we did it in the 80s. So why would I come in 2023 and say something's wrong with that? Sometimes you have to non-violently get people's attention to understand the degree of pain.
I just kind of wanted to round off the evening with a final question, which is, you've spoken passionately and frequently about questions on police brutality. but you're critical of the movement surrounding defund the police, and you spoke about it in quite stark terms. Where do you think the misconception of it as the solution to police brutality, in your view, emerged from? You spoke briefly about latte liberals, but it's more but I'm just...
No, I think people that are removed from the movement that I've been involved in was not to defund police. It was to direct where the funds go in terms of training and in terms of how connected they are to communities and community policing. You cannot live in areas that have high crimes and say we don't want a police presence. Is that we don't want an outside occupational presence that is not rooted in the community. So I think that it is one thing to be theoretical and say, well, let's defund, let's have no policing. Well, then how are we going to have any order in communities that we are subject to a lot of crime? And I think that was my view. And the reason I made this statement is because people that were talking have not represented people that have been the victims of police brutality. From, as I said, from Amadou Diallo to George Floyd. Not only were we the ones on the vanguard of those movements, we stick with those families. Many of them, we had to help pay the funerals. So somebody with a theory is talking about something. I'm on the ground with people that actual pain and that actually suffered. And what they want to see is an accountable police department. And that's what I want to see.
And one last one from the audience before we round the whole evening off. One last question.
The guy that you knocked off the stage is ready.
No, just there.
Reverend Sharpton, it's not lost on me, but something that you said in passing that it occurs to me folks here may not know, which is the ways in which the government and various entities in the U.S. have intentionally misconstrued the quotes, the lives of our public figures. In addition to your documentary, Loudmouth, that amplifies the ways in which things have been misconstrued, I would recommend Black Panther, The Vanguard, where it talks about the FBI and how these entities have literally, intentionally put out false information and words into your mouth. Would you like to say a little bit more about that?
I think, and not only me, Dr. King, people far greater than me, I think that if you're going to fight those in power, government, industry, media, they are going to fight back. And they fight back with distortions. So they will say, guys like Sharpton cause violence. And all I say is say, well, show me where they did. If I got stabbed and went to court and said I forgave the guy that stabbed me who was white, then why would you then say that I would cause violence? The same year that the Crown House riots in August, that January, a white guy stabbed me for leading a march in Bensonhurst, and I went to court and forgave him. So I'd have to be schizophrenic 3 months later to want to help kill a white guy when I forgave a guy that tried to kill me. FBI comes after everybody, and I said, you ought to be going after the mob that's controlling the music business and threatening us, because I was close with James Brown, knew what they was ripping off. We go and try to get them to investigate like we got them to do George Floyd. Now all of a sudden, y'all are FBI informants against the mob. We should be congratulated, but it's the distortions that they live by. And I think that you've got to be ready to do it. Luckily, I started young and was mentored by people that went through it, so I understood they were not going to play fair. They're going to try and come after you. In many ways, it's compliment to your work, because if they don't come after you, you may not be affected. The reason they stay after me is because I stay after them.
Well, Reverend Sharpton.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.